He said he was single, so I said yes to a relationship. We met through a mutual friend at a birthday party, and he seemed perfect. He was charming, attentive, and made me laugh like no one else could. For the first 2 months, everything was wonderful. We went on dates every weekend, talked on the phone every night, and I was starting to think I'd found someone special. Then one evening, we were having dinner at my favorite restaurant when he cleared his throat and said he had something to tell me. He said he had a child who was 4 years old. I put down my fork and stared at him. 2 whole months we'd been together, and he was just telling me this now? I felt my stomach drop. All those times we talked about our families, our past relationships, our dreams for the future, and he never once mentioned having a child. I wasn't pleased that he was telling me that late. Actually, I was furious. I wanted to walk out right there, leave him sitting at that table with his guilty face and his excuses. But he reached across the table and took my hand. He said he was sorry, that he'd been scared to tell me because his last girlfriend had left him when she found out about his child. He convinced me to stay, telling me he had learned his lesson and was going to be a better man for me because of the lesson he'd learned. Against my better judgment, I stayed. He promised complete honesty from that point forward. He showed me pictures of his daughter, a cute little girl with pigtails and his same smile. He told me her name was Sarah, and that he saw her every other weekend. He said the relationship with her mother was completely over, that they only communicated about their daughter. I wanted to believe him. I really did. For the next 2 months, things seemed to get back on track. He would tell me when he was going to see Sarah, and sometimes he'd show me videos of her playing at the park. I even started thinking about maybe meeting her one day, when the time was right. He said he lived with his parents to save money for Sarah's future education. It seemed responsible, mature even. 2 months after learning about his child, I realized he was actually living with his baby mama. The discovery came by accident. A friend of mine saw him at the grocery store late one night, buying diapers and baby formula. When she mentioned it to me, I was confused. Why would he need diapers for a 4-year-old? And baby formula? That made no sense at all. I started paying closer attention to things. Meanwhile, he told me he was living in his parents' house. Whenever I had to visit him, I visited him at his parents' house. It was a nice place in a quiet neighborhood. He had his own key, knew where everything was, and seemed completely at home there. I didn't meet his parents because his father was abroad and his mother had traveled to take care of her grandchild. Or at least, that's what he told me. His father was supposedly working on some big construction project in Dubai. His mother had gone to help his sister with her new baby in another state. The timing was always convenient. Whenever I suggested having dinner with them, they were never around. But the house had their photos on the walls, their mail on the counter, so I didn't question it too much. Then my friend saw him again, this time getting into a car with a woman and a baby at the mall. She managed to follow them to an apartment complex on the other side of town. She called me immediately. My hands were shaking as I listened to her describe what she saw. Him carrying the baby, the woman unlocking the door, all 3 of them going inside together like a happy little family. I didn't want to hear his explanation, so I told him it was over. I sent him a text that night saying I knew the truth and we were done. No discussion, no meeting, just done. This guy has the kind of tongue that can sell a mirror to a blind man, so I didn't want to hear anything from him. I blocked his number, blocked him on social media, and tried to move on with my life. But he wasn't giving up that easily. He showed up at my workplace the next day with flowers. Security wouldn't let him in, thank goodness. He waited outside for hours until my shift ended. I tried to walk past him, but he followed me to my car, begging me to just listen for 5 minutes. I kept walking. He came to my apartment that night, knocking on the door for an hour straight. My roommate threatened to call the police, and he finally left. This went on for a week. Flowers delivered to my office. Long letters slipped under my door. His friends calling me to say I was making a mistake, that I should at least hear him out. Finally, he came to my home and we talked. I was tired of the harassment, and I figured if I let him say his piece, maybe he'd finally leave me alone. He told me he didn't live with her, but rather, he rented the place and was living there. According to him, he'd been renting that apartment for 2 years, long before he met me. The lady only came around with the child because she had issues with accommodation. Her landlord had kicked her out, and she had nowhere else to go. He left his rented place for her when he met me, and he only went there to see their child. He pulled out his phone and showed me rental agreements, utility bills in his name, everything to prove the apartment was his. He said he'd been staying at his parents' house since we started dating, because he wanted to give her space while she got back on her feet. He was just being a good father, making sure his child had a roof over her head. The baby supplies my friend saw, he was buying them for his daughter, because her mother couldn't afford them. He sounded credible and remorseful, but I'd known enough not to let my guard down. Something still felt off about the whole story. If he was just helping her out temporarily, why did my friend see them looking so comfortable together? Why did they look like a couple? And why was the baby so young if his daughter was supposedly 4 years old? I told him I needed time to think. He left, but not before telling me again how sorry he was for not being upfront from the beginning. He said he loved me and would do anything to make things right. After he left, I sat in my living room trying to make sense of everything. Part of me wanted to believe him. Part of me knew I was being foolish for even considering it. So I pleaded with my informant to show me where the lady was, and she did. My friend was more than happy to help. She'd been suspicious of him from the start, she said. Something about him had always rubbed her the wrong way. The next day, she picked me up, and we drove to that apartment complex. She pointed out the exact unit. Second floor, corner apartment with a small balcony. I sat in the car for an hour working up the courage. What would I say? What if she slammed the door in my face? What if he was there? My friend encouraged me to go, saying I deserved to know the truth. Finally, I got out of the car and walked up those stairs. One afternoon, I went to knock on her door and she let me in. She was younger than I expected, maybe early 20s, with tired eyes and her hair in a messy bun. The baby was on her hip, drooling on her shirt. She looked at me curiously, but not unkindly, and asked if she could help me. When I said I needed to talk to her about her baby's father, she sighed and stepped aside to let me in. The walls of the hall were decorated with his photos and those of the lady and their baby. Not just 1 or 2 pictures, dozens of them. Him holding the baby at the hospital, the 3 of them at the beach. Birthday parties, holidays, regular Tuesday afternoons. They looked like any other family. My heart sank as I took it all in. She offered me water, and we sat on the couch. The baby crawled around on the floor, playing with blocks. I asked if they were married. She said no. Not yet, anyway, she added with a bitter laugh. I asked about their relationship. She asked why, and I told her everything. About meeting him 4 months ago, about him saying he was single, about the story of the 4-year-old daughter he saw on weekends, about him living with his parents. As I talked, her face didn't change much. She just nodded occasionally, like she was listening to a weather report. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Our baby is only 9 months old and not 4. He lives here but occasionally goes to his mom's place." I said, "Wow." The math hit me like a truck. 9 months old meant she was born just a few months before he met me, which meant he was with this woman when we started dating. Living with her, raising their baby together, and still going out to parties to meet other women. The 4-year-old daughter he told me about didn't exist. It was all a lie to explain why he had a child without admitting he was still with the mother. While I was shocked and looked bewildered, she looked fine, as if what I said to her was normal. She picked up the baby and bounced her gently on her knee. Then she looked at me with something like pity in her eyes. She told me, "You're new. I know 3 others. I've read their chats, and he tells them these same things you've told me, so I'm not surprised." 3 others. The words echoed in my head. She went on to explain that she'd found messages on his phone months ago. Different women, different stories, but always the same pattern. He was single, then suddenly had a child from a previous relationship. Always with elaborate explanations for why things were complicated. One woman he told his daughter was 6 and lived with his ex-wife in another city. Another he said the child was 2 and the mother had died in a car accident. She showed me screenshots she'd taken before he changed his phone password. The messages were almost word for word what he'd told me. The same promises to be a better man, the same excuses about his living situation, even the same line about his parents being away. It was like he had a script. I asked her why she stayed. She shrugged and said she loved him, and they had a baby together. She kept hoping he would change, especially after their daughter was born, but he didn't. If anything, he got worse. The parents' house he took me to, it actually was his mother's place. She let him use it when she was visiting her sister, which was often. His father had left years ago. There was no construction project in Dubai. We talked for another hour. She told me about finding lipstick on his collar, about the nights he didn't come home, about the credit card charges at restaurants she'd never been to. She said she'd confronted him multiple times, but he always had an explanation. Always a lie that was just believable enough. And she was tired, so tired, with a baby to take care of and no family nearby to help. I thanked her, but before I left, I took a picture of her and sent it to him. She didn't mind. In fact, she held the baby up and almost smiled for it. I said, "I'm with her. I know the whole truth now." I watched the message show as delivered, then read. The typing bubbles appeared and disappeared several times, then nothing. As I walked back to my friend's car, I felt a strange mix of anger and relief. Anger at him for all the lies, but relief that I'd found out now instead of years down the line. He didn't respond, and I didn't hear from him until days later when he came to say, "I didn't lie to you. Did she tell you that we were married?" He showed up at my apartment again, this time looking haggard and desperate. He tried to argue semantics. He never said he wasn't in a relationship, just that he was single. Single could mean not married, right? And technically, the apartment was his rental, so he wasn't lying about that either. The mental gymnastics he was doing to justify his behavior would have been impressive if it wasn't so pathetic. I stood in my doorway, not letting him in, and listened to him twist himself in knots trying to explain. He said she was crazy, that she'd trapped him with the baby, that he was planning to leave her but needed to time it right. He said the other women she mentioned were from before we met, that she was just jealous and trying to ruin what we had. He even tried to convince me that the photos on the wall were old, from when they were together, and she refused to take them down. A man like him will never tell the truth, even if you inject him with it. Every word out of his mouth was calculated to make him seem like the victim. When I didn't respond to one lie, he'd quickly pivot to another. It was exhausting to watch. I thought about that poor woman in the apartment, dealing with this every day while caring for their baby. I thought about the other women he was probably texting right at that moment, feeding them the same lines. I told him to leave and never contact me again. I said if he showed up one more time, I'd file a restraining order. I meant it. He must have seen it in my eyes because he finally stopped talking. He stood there for a moment, maybe realizing his silver tongue had finally failed him. Then he left. My only regret is not leaving when the red flag unfurled right in front of my face. When he told me about his child 2 months into our relationship, every instinct screamed that something was wrong. Who waits that long to mention they have a kid? But I wanted to be understanding, to be the cool girlfriend who didn't judge someone for their past. I ignored my gut feeling and paid the price. I waited until it flew. That was a mistake I shouldn't have made, but it's always better late than never. At least I found out after 4 months instead of 4 years. At least I wasn't the woman in that apartment, stuck with a baby and a man who couldn't stop lying. At least I got to walk away with just a broken heart and a hard lesson learned. Looking back, there were so many signs I missed or explained away. The way he'd sometimes not answer his phone at night, saying he'd fallen asleep early. The weekends he was supposedly with his daughter but never had any photos to share. The way he'd get nervous when we were out in certain parts of town, always suggesting we go somewhere else. I learned that when someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. Don't wait for the second or third or fourth red flag. Don't let smooth talk override your instincts. And definitely don't believe someone who claims their parents are conveniently never around to meet you. It's been a few months now since all this happened. I still see him sometimes, around town with different women. My friend says she saw him at that same birthday party where we met, chatting up someone new. I wonder if he tells them he's single, if he'll wait 2 months to mention his child, if he'll take them to his mother's house and claim it's where he lives. But that's not my problem anymore. I've moved on, sadder but wiser. I'm dating again, but now I ask the hard questions early. I trust my instincts, and if something feels off, I don't wait around for proof. I leave, because life's too short to waste on men who can't tell the truth, even if they do have tongues that could sell mirrors to blind men. The woman from the apartment? We actually became friends in a strange way. She finally left him a month after my visit. She said seeing my face, hearing my story, was the push she needed. She's doing better now, living with her sister, raising her daughter away from all his lies. We don't talk often, but sometimes she sends me pictures of the baby. She's walking now, looks just like him, but hopefully won't inherit his talent for deception. As for him, last I heard he was still spinning his web of lies, still juggling molt.